I still remember the smell of Mom's chocolate chip cookies baking every Sunday night. It was the scent of my childhood, the scent of safety. But now, whenever that smell drifts through my memories, it only brings pain. Because it's been 5 years since I last saw my mother. I'm Ava, 17 years old, living with my father in an affluent suburb of Columbus, Ohio. Our neighborhood is quiet, with manicured lawns, perfectly aligned mansions, top-of-the-line security systems, and neighbors who politely nod but never pry into each other's lives. From the outside, it looks like I have the perfect life. My father, Richard Sullivan, is a successful businessman, owner of a small but powerful financial firm in the area. He's always impeccably dressed in silver gray suits, drives a gleaming Range Rover, and has connections that stretch from the police chief to the principal of my school. But behind the electronic gates of our estate, I live inside an invisible cage that only I can feel. Dad controls everything, every morning. He checks my phone before driving me to school. Texts, calls, social media accounts, they've all been monitored for years with installed surveillance apps. No private passwords, no secrets. It's only to protect you, Ava. After what your mother did, I can't let anything hurt you again. He'd say in that gentle voice that sounded like love. But I know better. It's a sweet-sounding shackle. I was never allowed to join the art club, even though I loved painting. He said, "Artists are trouble, just like your mother was." When the school organized homecoming prom last year, I was forbidden from attending. Those parties are nothing but alcohol, drugs, and sex, not for respectable girls. Rachel, my only close friend Dad allowed me to have, was my sole breath of freedom during school days. She understood me. Sometimes, I caught her giving me sympathetic looks whenever I had to ask Dad's permission just to grab coffee after class. I tried to be the perfect daughter he wanted, straight A's in every class. No trouble. Home on time, completely obedient. But deep inside, questions burned like embers that never died. If Mom really cheated and abandoned me for some shallow desire like Dad said, why do I still remember the love in her eyes? Why, on the last night before she left, did she hug me so tightly and whisper, "No matter what happens, I will always love you. Never forget that." And why has she never tried to contact me? Not even once. I never dared to ask Dad those questions. I knew what would happen: sudden bursts of anger, accusations of being ungrateful, and the confiscation of my phone and laptop without warning. Dad is a master of emotional manipulation. Whenever I looked sad, he'd shower me with expensive gifts: a Tiffany necklace, a set of professional paintbrushes, or a weekend trip to New York. Then he'd whisper, "No one loves you more than I do. I'm the only one who stayed when your mother abandoned us." Those gifts felt heavier than any iron chain. Every night, lying in bed, I would secretly open my drawer and grip the old bracelet my mother gave me when I was little, the only thing Dad didn't know I still had. A tiny bracelet, with a delicate silver chain and a sunflower charm the flower Mom said always turns to the light, no matter how much darkness surrounds it. I kept telling myself I have to find the truth. I have to know what really happened to Mom. I never imagined that today's group session would be the spark that ignited everything. After class, Rachel leaned close and whispered, "Hey, have you ever considered that maybe your mom didn't betray you like your dad says?" Her words struck me like lightning. I turned to her, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Rachel glanced around and lowered her voice. "My mom used to work as a legal assistant back when your parents were divorcing. She said there were a lot of rumors going around. Some people even saw your dad hanging out with some other woman for months before the divorce happened." The ground beneath me seemed to shift. I didn't know what to believe. But in that moment, I knew one thing. Everything my father had told me for the past 5 years might have been a lie. And if he lied about that, who knows what else he's hiding? I barely slept that night. Rachel's words echoed in my head like the relentless ticking of a clock. What if Dad was the one who betrayed us? What if this whole story he'd told me for years was nothing but an elaborate performance? The next morning, I sat across from him at breakfast like always. The pristine white tablecloth, the freshly squeezed orange juice, the toast, the sunny side-up eggs, a perfect upper-class American breakfast. Dad sat opposite me, his eyes, as always, gentle yet cold. "Did you sleep well, Ava?" he asked, slicing into his toast with that unnervingly soft voice. "Yes, Dad." I smiled, keeping my composure. I had to maintain the facade until I uncovered the truth. At school, I caught up with Rachel and pressed for more. She hesitated before speaking. "My mom said your dad hired some really top-notch lawyers back then. A lot of what your mom tried to present never made it to court. There were even documents, something financial that your mom tried to bring up but got dismissed." "Documents? What kind?" I gripped Rachel's arm. "Not sure. But my mom thinks it had something to do with a trust fund your dad managed while he was still with your mom. After the divorce, everything ended up in your dad's name." A chill ran through me. Fragments of half-forgotten memories snapped together like jagged puzzle pieces, the fierce arguments behind closed doors, the thick folders Dad wouldn't let me near, the tense late-night phone calls he whispered into with a strained voice. When Rachel walked away, I lingered in the school parking lot. The late Ohio autumn air was biting cold. I looked up at the gray sky, and a question I had suppressed for years finally surfaced. If Mom wasn't the one at fault, where has she been for the past 5 years? Why didn't she fight to get me back? Or did Dad do something that made her give up entirely? That evening at home, I tried testing the waters. "Dad, can I join the art club? My teacher says I have a real talent." He lowered his copy of the Wall Street Journal, narrowing his eyes. "Ava, you know the rules. The arts fill people's heads with foolish dreams. It makes them vulnerable, just like your mother was. I want you focused on your studies. The SATs are only a few months away." I swallowed hard and nodded. My heart sank. The same old refrain, always using Mom as the excuse to tighten my leash. That night, while Dad retreated to his study, I quietly stood in the hallway. Through the barely cracked door, I heard his low voice on the phone. "No, I've blocked all contact. She won't be able to reach her. Trust me. She still believes everything I say. The past is dead. Let it stay buried." My breath quickened. My chest tightened. Her. He was talking about me. Blocked all contact. Did that mean Mom had tried to reach out to me? A storm of rage and terror swirled inside me. For years, Dad hadn't just forbidden me from seeking answers, he had actively cut off any chance for my mother to reconnect with me. And I, the naive, obedient daughter, had followed him like a blind little lamb all these years. For the first time, I noticed my hands trembling. Not from the cold, but from fury and fear. The next morning, sitting with Rachel in the school library, I whispered, "I have to find a way to contact my mom, no matter what it takes." Rachel's eyes widened with worry. "But your dad monitors everything. How are you going to reach her?" I took a deep breath. "I have an idea, but I need your help." For the first time in 5 years, I was finally taking action. I knew from this moment on, things could get more dangerous than ever. But I couldn't live another day under his lies. The plan began on Friday night, while Dad was attending a board meeting downtown and wouldn't be home until late. Rachel brought over an old phone she had wiped completely clean. No monitoring apps, no tracking software, no login history. This phone wasn't under Dad's control. We set up a brand new email account using a fake name, connecting through public Wi-Fi at a nearby coffee shop to avoid leaving any traceable IP address tied to my house. It all felt like a spy movie. But the intensity of it gave me my first taste of real control. "Are you sure about this?" Rachel asked. her eyes full of worry. I looked her straight in the eye, my voice steady. If my mom is still out there, I have to find her. We started sifting through what little information we could dig up. Rachel suggested searching the alumni records of the Bank Employees Association where my mom had worked before she disappeared. After nearly an hour of combing through old posts, we finally found a name, Caroline Sullivan, currently living in Dayton. I froze. Dayton was less than a 2-hour drive from Columbus. We found an address linked to her name on an old professional forum. We weren't certain it was my mom, but it was the only lead I had in 5 years. I sent a short email under a false identity, pretending to be a recruiter in finance, just to see if the email address was still active. Dear Ms. Yang Caroline, we are seeking experienced financial managers for senior positions. If interested, please respond. 15 minutes later, my screen blinked with a reply. Thank you. I am no longer working in finance, but I appreciate your inquiry. My heart nearly burst. It was her. I recognized the formal yet humble tone immediately, exactly how she used to write when I was little. Rachel whispered, "What now?" My throat went dry. Now I send a real email. My hands trembled as I typed, daring to break free from Dad's control for the first time in 5 years. Mom, it's me, Ava. Please don't delete this email. I found you. Every second waiting for a reply felt like a century. Then it came. Ava, is this really you? I burst into tears, my fingers shaking as I poured my heart out. I told her everything, how Dad had controlled every part of my life, cut off all contact, and filled my head with lies for 5 long years. We exchanged emails for nearly 3 hours. Each message felt like a release valve on a pressure cooker that had been building for years. She shared the painful truth of what had happened after the divorce, the unfair trial, the high-powered lawyers Dad had hired, and his deep network of influence that crushed her in court. And then I reached the part that stopped me cold. I tried many times to reach you, but everything was blocked. I hired lawyers, filed appeals, but your father controlled everything. In the end, I could only hope that one day you would be old enough to find me. The tears flowed uncontrollably. All the questions that had haunted me for years were finally being answered. Suddenly, the phone on the table vibrated. I jumped. It was Dad calling. I took a deep breath and answered calmly. Yes, Dad. I'm still home, studying for the SAT. Good girl. I have to leave early tomorrow. Make sure you stay focused and don't let anything distract you. Yes, Dad. I looked at Rachel. We didn't say a word. But in that silent glance, we both knew the real game had just begun. And in that moment, even bigger questions thundered through my mind. What other secrets was my father hiding if my mom once tried to expose financial misconduct that got dismissed? What was he so desperate to keep buried? Just how dangerous was the man I had been living with all these years? 3 days later, for the first time in 5 long years, I heard my mother's voice again. Rachel and I planned everything with the precision of a prison break. We used Uber instead of Dad's car to avoid leaving any GPS records. Rachel's phone was our only means of communication, while my old phone stayed powered off. We arranged to meet my mom at a small coffee shop on a quiet side street in Dayton, far from anyone Dad might know. The moment I stepped inside, I recognized her instantly. My mother, Caroline Sullivan, looked just as I remembered her gentle brown eyes, her chestnut hair now streaked with silver. When our eyes met, it felt like time had never passed. My baby girl, she whispered, bursting into tears as I barely managed to say, Mom. She hugged me tightly. Tears streamed down my face, soaking into her coat. I couldn't even tell how long I cried. The entire coffee shop seemed to disappear. It was just the two of us. Once we sat down, it took several minutes to collect ourselves. Mom stared at me for a long time, as if she still couldn't believe I was really sitting across from her. You've grown so much. You're as beautiful as my little angel always was. I gripped her hands tightly and whispered, "Mom, tell me everything. I need to know the truth." Her smile faded, replaced by deep pain in her eyes. Slowly, she began to unravel the dark pieces I had never known. "You know your father, he's brilliant, persuasive. But the cruelest part is how well he knew how to destroy me legally." She explained how they had once set up a trust fund when I was little, intended for our family's future and my college education. Dad, with his financial connections, had slowly moved investments into complex third-party accounts held by intermediaries. By the time I realized what he'd done, the paperwork was already altered. I threatened to expose him, but he struck first. And what I had heard for 5 years as gospel was actually his first attack the affair story. He hired fake detectives, doctored photos, paid for false witnesses, and submitted it all to the court. My lawyer couldn't fight it. Everyone saw the evidence and decided I was unfit to be your mother. In the end, I had no choice but to sign the divorce settlement he offered. If I refused, he threatened to take me to federal court and have me jailed for financial fraud. My hands went ice cold. "Why didn't you try harder to see me?" I whispered, my throat burning. "I did, Ava. I hired different lawyers, filed 2 appeals, both denied. Every letter, phone call, email, all returned or blocked. I believe he manipulated the entire communication system around you. I remembered all those times Dad changed my phone numbers, switched my email accounts, always saying it was for personal security. The weekly phone checks, every piece fit into his perfect control plan." Mom looked at me with red, swollen eyes. "I never gave up on you, Ava. I just didn't have the power he did. I counted the days, the years, hoping you'd one day start asking questions." I squeezed her hand, choking back tears. Beside me, Rachel quietly wiped her own eyes. We talked for over 2 hours. Mom gradually shared what records she had managed to keep concerning the trust fund. While they weren't strong enough to overturn the divorce, they might be enough if we could find additional documents to reopen a financial investigation. As we prepared to leave, Mom gripped my shoulders and whispered, "If you decide to pursue this, be careful. Ava, your father. He isn't just a selfish man. He knows how to cut off every escape route, and he won't hesitate if he feels threatened." On the ride back home, I sat in silence, staring out the Uber window. Streetlights streaked past like sharp beams slicing through my swirling thoughts. Mom had fought for 5 years without hope. Now it was my turn. How had Dad evaded the law for so long, and those hidden documents buried somewhere in our house? Could they hold the answers? The days that followed felt like walking a tightrope. Every glance, every word, every movement from Dad kept my nerves stretched taut, terrified that he might uncover my secret plan at any moment. But he stayed the same. Still the sweet, doting father in front of the neighbors. Still taking me to church every Sunday. Still casually asking about my SAT prep. Everything was polished. Perfect. Only I knew the facade was starting to crack. Thursday night, as I was studying for the SATs in my room, I heard his footsteps pause outside my door. He knocked lightly. "Ava." "Yes, Dad." He cracked the door open, smiling tenderly. "You okay? You seem a bit more tense lately." I swallowed, keeping my voice steady. "Probably just the exam stress." He stepped inside, his kind gaze as usual, though I sensed an undercurrent of suspicion beneath it. "I just want to remind you of something, Ava." He sat down on the edge of my bed, placing his warm hand on my shoulder. "Life is full of temptations, especially for young people. There are people out there who might try to pull you away from your family, plant lies in your head, make you doubt those who truly love you." I looked up, maintaining a blank expression. "I understand, Dad. I only want you to always remember who has been here for you." His eyes locked onto mine, as if trying to read my every thought. I held my breath. Then he stood up, smiling gently, brushing my hair back. Get some rest, my little princess. The door closed. Only when his footsteps faded down the hall did I dare to exhale. He was starting to suspect. The next morning, my worst nightmare unfolded. While I was at school, Dad suddenly called me into the principal's office for an emergency meeting. When I walked in, he was already seated, accompanied by an IT technician, with my laptop open in front of them. Hello, Ava. His voice was cold as steel. I froze. We received an alert from the security software, he said, turning the screen toward me. On it was a log showing an unfamiliar Wi-Fi signal from the coffee shop in Dayton. The blood drained from my face. Do you have anything you want to say? His voice dropped, losing all of its usual gentleness. I forced myself to stay calm. That was my friend Rachel. She borrowed my laptop to check some emails for her mom. We were studying at the coffee shop. His eyes narrowed, his lips pressed into a thin, sharp line. From now on, you won't need a personal laptop. Or a phone. He closed the laptop and signaled to the IT technician. Erase everything. Lock down all social media accounts. I want surveillance doubled from this point forward. I stood there, my stomach twisting into knots. That night, he shut down the entire house Wi-Fi and confiscated all my internet-connected devices. My phone was reduced to basic call functions only. At dinner, with just the two of us. He raised his glass of red wine and smiled. See, Ava, I've always told you the world out there is full of dangers. I stayed silent, staring at him as fury surged inside me. This man who had manipulated me with fake love for 5 years was now revealing his true, ruthless control. But I wouldn't break. Later that night, once I was sure he was asleep, I slipped out of my room and crept down to the basement, a place he had forbidden me from entering for years. The door had a keypad lock, but Dad had always trusted me too much. My birthday code still worked, 510. The door creaked open, revealing a damp, dimly lit room stacked with boxes, papers, and dusty files. This was where his secrets lived. I ran my fingers along the rows of boxes, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then my eyes landed on a thick file. Sullivan Family Trust, Internal Reallocation Drafts, 2015-2018. I grabbed it, clutching it tightly, and suddenly, new questions flooded my mind. If this was what Mom had been talking about, if the entire trust had been illegally restructured, then who else was involved in Dad's financial web of manipulation? I huddled in the corner of the basement, the dim yellow light casting long shadows across the stacks of thick folders piled around me. In my hands was the key to everything the trust fund restructuring drafts. Secret offshore accounts, and transactions signed by Dad documents that had never surfaced during the divorce. My heart pounded so hard I could barely breathe. But for the first time, I felt like I held the power. I had to move fast before Dad realized anyone had been down here. Using Rachel's old phone, which I had secretly kept, I snapped photos of every page, every ledger, every signature. Once done, I carefully returned everything to its place, wiped down any fingerprints, and quietly crept back to my room. That night, I contacted Mom using a prepaid burner phone Rachel had just purchased for me. We talked for hours. Mom immediately reached out to Ethan Moore, an attorney she had researched for years but never had enough evidence to involve. Now, everything had changed. 2 days later, I met Ethan for the first time at a small bookstore near the university campus. He was in his early 30s, sharp, cautious, and absolutely discreet. I have to admit, Ava, Ethan said as he scrolled through the images on his iPad. If these documents are legitimate, your father isn't just guilty of trust fund fraud. This points to money laundering, guardianship abuse, and perjury during the divorce. We're potentially looking at federal criminal charges, not just civil disputes. I swallowed hard. But he has connections everywhere. Judges, the police chief. How do we fight that? Ethan gave a cold, confident smile. That's exactly why you need someone outside his circle. I'm not afraid of his old buddies, but we need more direct evidence recordings, videos, anything proving manipulation, threats against your mother, or direct admissions of guilt. I nodded, my throat tight. I knew exactly what I had to do. That night, with all electronic surveillance locked down, I used a tiny voice recorder hidden inside the bracelet Mom had given me, the one thing Dad never suspected I still possessed. Over dinner, I initiated the conversation. Dad, while cleaning my closet, I found some old financial documents about the trust fund. There are a few things I don't really understand. His eyes flickered, but then he chuckled, trying to soothe me. Oh, those complicated papers aren't something you need to worry about. I've taken care of everything. It will all belong to you one day. I pressed further, feigning innocence. But there were transfers to offshore accounts. Dad, one document mentioned an account in the Caymans. This time, his smile vanished. Where did you find those? His voice dropped. I kept my expression calm. Just in some old boxes in the basement. The room went completely silent. His eyes turned cold. Sharper than I'd ever seen. Slowly, he placed his wine glass on the table. Listen carefully. Ava, some things in life aren't black and white. Adults sometimes have to do what's necessary to protect their family. I stared directly into his eyes. Protect or cover up? His face hardened, his voice low and gravelly. You're far too naive to understand how ruthless real power can be. Your mother was weak, and the weak get eliminated. That statement, both a confession and a chilling threat, was all captured by the recorder hidden in my bracelet. 3 days later, Ethan had everything he needed. The case was submitted to the district attorney's office, charging Dad with guardianship abuse, federal financial fraud, and obstruction of justice. Everything was kept under strict confidentiality. But when the first subpoena arrived at Dad's office, his carefully crafted mask shattered completely. That night, he pounded on my bedroom door, shouting like a madman behind the locked door. What the hell have you done? Ava, you think you can beat me? I've spent years clearing every loose end. I'll crush you and your mother all over again. I stood behind the door, my hands trembling but unyielding. I whispered back, You've run out of places to hide this time. And I knew the final showdown was coming. Court day arrived. For the first time, Columbus heard Richard Sullivan's name not on business headlines, but splashed across Ohio's criminal news. The morning broadcasts blazed with headlines. Financial mogul Richard Sullivan indicted trust fund fraud, guardianship abuse, and federal money laundering. The courtroom was packed. Reporters crowded the hallways. This was no longer a simple family dispute. It had become one of the biggest financial scandals in the state in years. I sat beside Mom and Ethan, in front of us. My father, once the towering figure of power in my life, now sat silently at the defendant's table, his pale gray suit looking hollow and empty. As the prosecutor read the charges, each count landed like a hammer blow against the carefully curated image of the ideal father he had crafted over the years. Abuse of minor guardianship, family trust fund fraud, cross-border money laundering, perjury during divorce proceedings, willful obstruction of mother-daughter contact, post-divorce, with each charge. Dad bowed his head lower. Then it was my turn to testify. I took a deep breath, glanced at the sea of reporters, then locked eyes with him. He stared back, but the arrogance was gone, replaced by seething resentment. My voice was steady and clear as I laid out everything: the years of isolation after the divorce, the suffocating control, Rachel's initial warning, the search for Mom, the threats, and finally, the discovery in the basement. What did the defendant say to you about the offshore trust accounts? The prosecutor asked. I clenched my hands lightly. He told me, adults sometimes have to do what's necessary to protect their family. When I asked why my mother was eliminated, he said, your mother was weak, and the weak get eliminated. The courtroom fell utterly silent. Each word slashed through his facade like a razor. The crucial moment came when the recording from my bracelet was played the undeniable proof. Dad's gruff, arrogant voice echoed through the courtroom. You're far too naive to understand. Your mother was weak, so she was eliminated. I've cleared every loose end for years. Some in the audience shook their heads. A few gasped. Reporters scribbled furiously. Dad's face turned ashen as his own voice filled the room. During closing arguments, Ethan stood tall and addressed the jury. Your Honor, this is not a simple property dispute. This is a living example of how one man wielded financial, social, and legal power to completely destroy a mother's rights and imprison his own child's freedom for 5 long years. The defendant didn't just manipulate assets, he manipulated a minor's very mind. He built an entire false world to maintain absolute control. After 2 grueling weeks of trial, the verdict was delivered. Guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with full seizure of his illicitly transferred assets and permanent loss of guardianship rights. All stolen trust fund money was returned to my mother, who regained full legal custody of me. As Dad was handcuffed and escorted from the courtroom, he looked back at me one last time. For the first time, there was no control. No victory, only the collapse of an empire that once seemed untouchable. Weeks later, Mom and I moved into a small new house not as grand as the old mansion, but cozy and filled with sunlight. On our first evening there, Mom held my hand and whispered, You saved me. You saved yourself. I smiled, gazing up at the vast blue sky. For the first time in 5 years, I was free. No more chains,